There we go. Welcome back into another episode of Vandy 24/7 Live alongside Chris Lee. I'm Billy Derick, and it's not a beautiful Wednesday in Nashville. Very, very cold, and we're going to be getting some snow here later in the week, so everybody hunker down in Nashville. But, Chris, we got some basketball to talk about. We got a mailbag to open up as well, but I'll give it the floor for all these sponsors.
Yeah, we will be talking basketball today. Billy and I were both in Memorial Gymnasium last night for Mississippi State's 12-point win over Vanderbilt. I think we've got some takeaways, implications, whatever you want to call it. From there, we'll be taking some of your questions and comments in the chat. So, Billy informs me my mic just got disconnected, so let's try that again. I don't know what happened.
There we go.
How's it sound? Okay, I must have nudged a cord and moving the mic. But anyway, yeah, want to start by thanking the people who make this show possible. And that starts with the Wash House. They present basketball season. Stephen Andrews is a really good friend of mine. Stephen was probably, I'm going to guess, in the gym last night, or if not, he was certainly watching from TV. If you were dreading laundry day, if it is stealing time from the things that you truly enjoy, you can let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Our professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That is your time. Within 24 hours, pick up your nicely folded, fresh, clean laundry ready to be put away. Check out washhouseclean.com. Stop in, get your time back. We are looking for sponsors for baseball season and also football season. Could really use your support in that regard. If you are interested, reach out to me, chrislee70@gmail.com. To be honest, I think we work with the budget that is probably at minimum a third or a quarter of the size of most sites who cover Power 5 teams, and at maximum, some of them probably have 20 times the budget we've got. These things help us pay the bills. They have gone directly into improving the product and not into my pocket. So if you're interested, let me know. Reach out that way. Other thing, and if you've not done this, treat yourself to a Vandy 24/7 subscription. You can go to Vandy 24/7. I think the promo is still on there. Billy,
Yep.
My screen is showing a little different. But anyway, you can get a year of Vandy 24/7. Here's what you get. You get access to all the premium posts, all the premium content, our game coverage for all 3 sports, Robbie Weinstein's recruiting insights in football, Justin Angel's coaches analysis. Nobody's doing what we do in terms of covering Vanderbilt. You get it $26 a year. I don't know that I can go and take – I can't go and get fast food anymore and take my 2 kids, and I'm probably going to spend $26 or more. You can get a year of that. You can help us. If you have not done it, not only is it a no-brainer, things like that are crucial to helping us do what we do. So I would ask you to please do that. Most of you cannot consider a podcast sponsorship. Also, do we have the super chat feature enabled here, Billy?
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to look into that.
If we don't, we will be doing that. That's a good way for just people to drop small donations into the podcast and help keep our coverage going. But anyway, if you have not subscribed to Vandy 24/7, go there. I think there's a promo, again, that lets you get for $26 off. If it's not there and you want to pay the full price, that is also welcome. It's only $99. That's also a bargain. Again, that goes directly into what we do here. All right, Billy, last night we were both in Memorial. Vanderbilt started off pretty well the first 6 or 7 minutes. Mississippi State just kind of more or less overwhelmed Vanderbilt with defense. There was a stretch where they just could not get anything in their half-court offense and never really recovered. State came out of the locker room hot in the second half. Next thing you know, it's 22 points. Vanderbilt made a run at the end. Just didn't have enough to get over the hump. I think probably an unhealthy Jason Edwards. By that point, I think they just kind of thrown in the towel. He played 3 minutes in the second half. That was a big factor, but not a season-changing performance, but certainly disappointing one. It gets a little harder to get where you want to go if that's postseason. I think that makes that certainly makes South Carolina next week close to a must-win. And I kind of felt like if they were going to get to the NCAA tournament, they needed to have 3 of their first 4. If I'm right, that means they need to go get one in Columbia Saturday.
Yeah, Jason Edwards' struggles, it was confusing because, going into the game, we knew he was still banged up and not 100%. But there had been a scoop early in the day that he was going to give it a go and play. But he just, I hadn't seen Edwards look like that all season, Chris. And obviously Byington after the game said that he didn't practice the last couple of days and that he probably should have sat him. But it, 0 for 8 from the field, and he really didn't play. I don't know how many minutes he played, but it wasn't a ton. He didn't play a ton. So, in a way, he didn't play a whole lot there. And I think you saw the impact of that. He's averaging 19 a game. And when you take him out of this offense, that's what happens. They had 2 2-minute scoring droughts in the first half, Chris, that really set them back. Mississippi State was bigger, faster, stronger, but Vandy cut it to 5 there late. And, I look at Joe and go, well, is this a game? Is this all of a sudden a game? And, I think defensively is how they got back into it. They started forcing Mississippi State into some bad possessions. I didn't think Vandy played great, Chris. I don't think they shot the ball great.
No.
Like you said, there was a lid on the rim for a lot of that game for them. I don't know how many layups they missed right at the rim. They missed some good wide open looks from 3 that typically go down. I know they struggled to start the year, but they started shooting it better. And I thought their lack of program cohesion and stability kind of finally caught up with them. And I'm not saying that's a negative right now, but we hadn't seen that because of the level of competition. We saw it against Drake and maybe on the road against Virginia Tech for a little bit and a couple other games, but we hadn't seen them face a team like this. And I started to realize that, this team is still learning each other, and that probably came into play. I had an interesting question for Byington after the game. Carey came out with 4 minutes to play, but it was only a minute long, but he said he was exhausted. He also banged up his leg there, which I think is something to monitor. I think he should probably be fine. But I thought Claudell Harris's shot to extend it to 8
was the backbreaker.
Was it, because you had cut it to 5. And, if you get a stop there, get another bucket, you got a chance to cut it to a 1-possession game, and you never know. And even Chris Jans after the game said, who knows what happens without that Claudell Harris shot. So that was massive. And, Byington, he said they got out of character. Mississippi State did a really good job of taking them out of their offense. And that's a really good Mississippi State team, Chris. On off nights from Hubbard and Kugel, who Joey and I talked all about yesterday. We were like, the keys to stopping this team is Hubbard and Kugel. Well, they didn't really do much. I think they combined for 9 points. I don't know if Kugel scored at all, but you saw their depth. Cam Matthews and Claudell Harris, RJ Melendez really played well too. Yeah, that's a really good team. They could be top 10, and Vanderbilt was right there at the 4-minute mark. I came away encouraged, but also, if this team wants to make the tournament, you're going to have to start picking off a couple of games like that at home against some big teams, because you will start running out of chances.
Yeah, I think there are 2 directions I want to go with this. One's kind of the bigger picture litmus test for a number of reasons, so don't let me forget to get there. But I wanted to hit some things that were interesting in the game last night. Jason Edwards, not having him. We watched him warm up. I remember I posted, hey, he looks okay. But they're jogging through the layup line. That's not the same as trying to guard Josh Hubbard and whoever else you've got to guard for them, and they've got some dudes. I really would have been interested to see, like, if Jason Edwards is 100% last night, what they do down the stretch. Because I think you kind of need to have Hogarth in a game like that. He won them the LSU game. just with the veteran presence. Like, he had not been a scorer in that game. And then it's like, hey, when they needed buckets and LSU was making a charge,
Yeah.
he and Jalen Carey hit all their big shots. So I think with the amount of ball that Hoggard has played and the stage that he's played it on, you figure he's going to be on the floor except for breathers. Okay, what do you do at the other spots? You need points to make a charge. The guy that has done that all year is Jason Edwards. But, Billy, when he came in the game last night, I want to say, I think they were up 2. He came in for about 5 minutes. He missed 3 shots, turned the ball over 3 times, I think, maybe twice. And when he went out, I think they were down 8 or 9. And they never got it back. And I'm not saying this to take shots at Jason Edwards. I don't know how much pain he was in. If you've ever had that injury happen, if you've ever like just been hitting a pickup game or backyard football game and gotten like a knee to
it can
the thigh
linger
there,
for a week.
It really hurts. And in games where you're talking about pro caliber athletes that you are facing, when if you're off a little bit, you can be off a lot when it comes to speed and quickness. It's enough to go from maybe being able to keep up with the guy to not. I thought Jason Edwards knew. I guess some could say it's selfishness, but it looked to me like a guy that, like, all right, I've been our go-to guy all year. We're going to do this here. I need to start doing my thing. And I thought he forced some stuff last night. But what I was getting at, down the stretch, they needed somebody to be that guy. And if Edwards is healthy, I would have been interested to see how the playing time went down the stretch, because I feel like if you do that, you're going to have to take either Tanner or Huffman off the floor. I thought Huffman in particular was playing really good defense. I'm not sure who had primary responsibility in Hubbard most of the game last night. I probably should have locked in a little bit more. But I felt like Huffman really could not come off the floor for them last night. Tanner, well, and that's where they got their spark, right, was from their defense. And so, like, how would the decisions have been? Because I feel like you take one of those guys off the floor, you lose something on that end, but I'm not sure that either of them gave them what you needed on the other end.
Right.
For reasons we saw. And at the end, they just could not get enough buckets to make it happen. Yeah.
Byington also said, I want to figure out how to get good against good teams. And I think that's the next step for this team. We've seen them against Jackson State and whoever else they played, Tennessee Tech. They didn't play a ton of competition, as we know, Chris. But how do they get good against good teams? I think obviously number one, you got to get Jason Edwards healthy. I would be surprised if we see him Saturday against Missouri. Now maybe these next few days he starts to feel better, but they need him, Chris. I mean, I think we realized that after last night's game. Okay, he cannot have 0 points. And also I thought there were some interesting matchups and matchup problems in that game that I was a little surprised by as well. Like McLaughlin has been really good all year, I think, on the boards and especially on defense as well. But number 3 for Mississippi State, forgetting his name, he really had his way with McLaughlin. And then you also look at MJ Collins looked a little off, at times, even defensively, whereas those guys have been pretty consistent defensively and even rebounding and just doing a lot of the dirty work. Well, even they got thrown off their game a little bit because just of how long Mississippi State is and how physical they are. So, Chris, I think they're fine, but I think this was a quick and sudden realization of everything they've got to try to figure out. And, I think they'll have to get creative. I think it was pretty glaring about, the size disadvantage. That was something that kind of finally stood out with this team.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Collins. I feel like he's really played big in some big spots for them the last 6 weeks, and I always kind of forget to give him credit, so I wanted to do that here. I think the bigger conversation, and look, you don't want to overreact and define a season by one game. I mean, things can, like, just look at what happened elsewhere in the SEC last night. Kentucky puts up 106 on Florida in Rupp.
Mm-hmm.
Florida comes home, holds Tennessee to 45 in just a historic performance. Kentucky then goes on the road. Now, without Kobe Bryant, who's the best shooter in the league, or he was there, but I think he'd had the cold or the flu or something, wasn't the same guy, and gets beat by a Georgia team that was just very meh at Ole Miss. And so I wouldn't make sweeping conclusions about any of those teams in
Right.
the larger picture. And I'm not going to do that about Vanderbilt here, but I think that the issues that we thought could be a problem were on display. Is how do they do against athleticism and quickness and length, and like some of those passes that they were making last night,
we're not there.
Long they weren't, and when you're playing New Orleans, that's going for a layup or a dunk on the other end. State's got the quickness, the size, the athleticism, the length to close those spaces and pick them off. So I don't think, and you can't replicate that in practice with what they've got. Maybe Kajani Wright could have helped them in that regard a little bit with his size, but they don't have that guy on their roster. And so I'm not going to ascribe total meaning to last night. But I am going to say, we have said, hey, look, they will not have faced a team like they're about to face in any regard. And the performance looked a lot different. So that was kind of your first litmus test. It was also at home. Like, even if they'd won, we might be saying, well, nobody's winning in anybody else's building right now. And, I don't think the take would have been that harsh. I think it would have been, hey, give them a lot of credit. They just beat the number 14 team in the country. And one I think you could make a case is potentially better than that. But it's what we have because your non-conference schedule. Now, I'm not blaming Mark Byington for this. I think it was smart. They needed to get some confidence. They needed to get some wins. They did not need to get buried to the point where you look up in mid-January and you're going, I don't even know how I have a winning season, which is not what the program needed after going 9-23 last year. But it was a litmus test that we had, and they didn't pass it. And again, some of that's bad luck with the Edwards injury. I would have liked to seen the game with Edwards at full strength. Maybe we're having a different conversation. Now, number two, the other thing I've been watching was the fan base and attendance. I want to see, can they get 10,000 of their people in the building again? They didn't. Now, the attendance last night, if you looked at the figure, what was it, 85, 50-something? 8,600. And I will tell you this, sometimes you see attendance numbers.
And that's just a tad more than the women's game on Sunday, by the way, so keep that in mind.
Yeah. Sometimes you see attendance numbers and you're like, okay, they say 8,600. That was probably seats sold. No, I think that was pretty close to butts and seats. Now, you got I don't think it was a large presence of Mississippi State fans, but it was a loud presence. You did hear the volume inside that gym. Now, it's not what it used to be, but it's as loud as it's been in a while. But to me, and you could say, well, cold weather, although, there wasn't ice to prevent anybody from getting there. You could say the late tip-off, that probably held back, some fans with kids and stuff like that just with school open now, at least it is in Williamson County, couldn't go. So you kind of, but I mean, that to me, there were litmus tests last night for how do they do against that kind of team and what does the size of your fan base look like? And it's a little, that it was a little bit of a reality check because Billy,
it was,
and I knew we got all the excuses and I hate we haven't won in a while. Well, who's been responsible for that? Who was it that sat back when we all knew Jerry Stackhouse was not the answer for the reasons that we knew, watched him lose games, watched him insult the fan base, and people were done with it. Yeah. So you can't use losing as an excuse if you're Vanderbilt.
No.
If you've got the same people running things that have been running it for a while, which is the case. And again, none of this to me is on Mark Byington. I'm also I look back on it, I'm amazed at what he did with the roster.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, somebody asked me on the board, and it just kind of occurred to me. And they said, how shocked are you that he's been able to do what he's done? And this was before yesterday. I said, I'm floored, because we talked about this before the hire and before the portal. And we said, hey, look, their brand is so far down that I don't know that they can get a lot of decent players. And like, I would not have been shocked if they were looking at another 9-23 year this year, just knowing what he walked into. But I will tell you this. I think they were up against limits. I had somebody who's a coach at another Power 5 school, or on the staff, I should say that, hey, look, they're having to pay a tax right now for talent.
Yep.
They're having to overpay to get kids. To me, the fact that he could bring in 9 really serviceable guys, serviceable doesn't do it justice to some of them, right? But in the minimum, all 9 of those transfers are serviceable. They help them. And Wright would have been another one that might have helped them last night, at least on just having a guy to deal with the length. Who knows? But my point is, Mark gets an A+ for the way he handled the roster. But when you dig yourself a 50-foot hole, you could put 40 feet of dirt in the hole, and you're still, trying to look. You still need more dirt to look out over the edge. That's kind of where they are, and where I think they're running into problems. There was 2 things that were noticeable last night. The difference in athleticism. I just don't think right now they can go out and get that kind of athlete that most of the top half of the rest of the league has. Doesn't feel like they just got that in high school recruiting. Maybe they did. I think that's the thing they're running to. And there's not if you make a list, and I do think that some of this, like shooting, I think is down across the league the past few years. I don't think that you've got the John Jenkinses and the Chris Loftons in mass that you used to have in this league. But you start naming shooters. I guess Tyler Nichols, their best shooter, maybe Edwards. Like, I make a list of top 20 shooters I've seen playing in Vanderbilt uniforms. I don't think that there's a guy on this roster there. Yeah. So I think that was another part of the litmus test thing last night, is you see very clearly where when you start putting them side by side next to the top teams, where they fall short is very clear. And you know what? I think it's going to be – it was a challenge for Mark to get the roster to where he got it. I give him credit. But I think you're going to have about as big a challenge making up the margin, getting this roster from here to where State and some of the other teams are, as you are getting it from pretty much ground zero to respectability.
Yeah, in State Vanderbilt has a tougher non-conference schedule. We see this a lot earlier. We really didn't. We didn't make this observation and realization really until now. Now, I think before the season we knew that about this team, and that could be the case, but we hadn't seen it on the floor. And they go out last night, and everybody learned a lot about the team. They fought. Like when they were down 22. I didn't have a ton of confidence they would be able to cut it to a 5-point game with 4 minutes left, but they did. So, the things they're doing defensively, I think will keep them in games. And if they continue to take care of the ball, they'll still have a shot. But you're playing in the best conference in America against world-class athletes. You're going to see a lot more of Cam Matthews type guys and Melendez who and Hubbard only had 9 points, but that was the more impressive part about Mississippi State last night. Vanderbilt, they did a good job on Hubbard, I thought, but they still had 3 other guys that went off for them. And, Chris, another realization last night too, and I keep forgetting number 3's name from Mississippi State. I'm sorry about that, but he's 6'10", and he set a ball screen
from Miami, the Woku.
No, not
I'll look it up.
Nwoku.
Is it Cam Matthews? I'll look it up.
Not Cam Matthews, but number 3. He's for Mississippi State. He's
Keyshawn Murphy. Yeah.
Keyshawn Murphy really impressed me last night, and because of his body type, he's 6'10", 220, 230, Vanderbilt doesn't have a guy like that. Now, I think and even
Nope.
Jalen Carey you could say, but he doesn't even have the skill set of a Keyshawn Murphy. Murphy set a ball screen, I think, for Hubbard, and kind of just rolled back out in the middle of the paint and shot a floater at 6'10" from 8 to 10 feet out. And I'm like, Vanderbilt doesn't have a guy that can do that. And I think until they do, they're going to struggle with a guy like a Keyshawn Murphy and there's a few other Keyshawn Murphys in the SEC as well. And it was pretty quick into the game too, Chris. Well, I say that Vanderbilt got off to a pretty good start, but 10 minutes into the game, you knew it's going to be tough. Mississippi State just kind of swallows you and suffocates you. And Mark Vandy said that at the game. He said they've been killing everybody they played. And so I mean they beat Carolina by what, 30 on last Saturday, Chris. So if anything,
35.
35, yeah. If anything, you didn't lose by 35 if you're Vanderbilt. But no, I agree with you on where this program's at. I told Joey, late in that game, I said they're paying they've sucked for the last 7 years tax. I mean, that's
been longer than that.
Even longer than that.
This has not been Vanderbilt basketball, like people that grew up on Vanderbilt basketball since they beat Kentucky
2012
in the SEC championship game. I mean, it just hasn't. Yeah. You could see it back in,
you saw glimpses.
Right after that. Well, and look, Kevin Stallings, I'll give the guy credit. He did a better job than I and probably other people, certainly me, gave him credit for at the time. Now that I know the inner workings of the school and things like that and how dysfunctional it is, which I did not know at the time. Didn't really start to understand that till about 2019, 2020. Then I got a real education. And if you follow my work and you wonder why my tone has changed on things, that is why. Because you don't know how it works till you learn how it works. And when you learn how it works, you realize how hard it is to win in anything at Vanderbilt. But all that to say, Kevin was in a spell where the criticism at the time, fairly or unfairly, was he was probably spending too much time watching his son, who ended up being a major league catcher and still is, playing travel ball, than he was on the recruiting trail. And you could see it slip. Like they just come out of that spell where they had Jeff Taylor and Jenkins and Tinsley and really good supporting players, kind of a lot like State had last night, to be honest with you, with Lance Goulbourne and guys like that. Like that was the last gasp. And when those guys went, the kind of guys that Kevin had been winning with were gone. And they never really got it back. The closest they came was the Riley, the Chance, Wade Baldwin.
Fisher Davis.
Yep. Yeah, that Kevin did, to his credit, start getting them back there. And then that was the time where like they just were so statistically unlucky in those close games. If you believe in that kind of thing, they just didn't get it back. And then we know about Bryce Drew, and then Stack, for reasons that anybody paying attention knew that was going to be a disaster. But it has been a long time, Billy.
It's been a bit
since it's been. I mean, like you're what, 25?
Mm-hmm.
See, you and this is the thing I try to tell people. I'm not picking on the younger crowd. You think you know what Memorial Magic and what Vanderbilt basketball is. You really don't, because you've never lived it.
Yeah.
But once you are something for so long, I mean, is it fair to debate? Is that just what it is now? I mean, if you want to play that with like Rice baseball 15 years ago was as big a power as there was in the sport. Now you don't hear a peep about Rice baseball.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been so long that I think that's a fair question to ask. Like, what is the ceiling now?
Yeah.
Given how long it has been since they've been at the level that they've been at. And again, that's why I give Mark a ton of credit. I mean, I hope 10 years from now, Mark Byington is still the coach. And I think if he is, he's good enough. He works hard enough to figure out. I get the impression that Mark, like, basketball is his life. I don't think he's got another
Mm-hmm.
I just think when his head hits the pillow and he falls asleep, his last thought is basketball. I think when he wakes up in the morning, his first thought is basketball. I don't think there's a lot of variance in between. If they're going to figure it out, I think he's reasonably as good a chance as they've got. But you saw what he ran into last night.
Yeah, you did, and that's what I'll say. I know we got to get into the mailbag. That's the last thing I'll say here is he's the best guy for them right now with where they're at. You know, he's going to put in the work. He's going to put in the time. And again, he's still paying the Vandy has been really relevant in basketball. Yeah, tax for, you know, and we'll see how long he's got to keep paying that. But Chris, we've got some comments already on YouTube. I'm going to table those. We put out a mailbag yesterday. We'll get to the YouTube comments a little bit later. We'll kind of rumble through these. And then we've got some mailbag questions as well. But Chris, if you want to get to the sponsor for the mailbag, I'll roll into it.
While you're pulling up the mailbag, reminder, it is brought to you by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. And these guys have been with us since day one. First podcast we ever did, they were a sponsor. I think they sponsored my radio stuff back when I did radio instead of podcasting. It's been so long, I can't remember now. Point being, these guys have been with us. They've been loyal. They were the originals. Hopefully you do not get hurt or one of your loved ones does not get hurt in an accident. But if they do, please call Taylor or Russell, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. And you know what? Give them a call anyway. Tell them you appreciate their sponsorship of our work here. Guest line is presented by John Levin, good friend of the show. Wobble Bond Dickinson thanks the student athletes at Vanderbilt University for their dedication, effort, and hard work. And also presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-line packaging automation.
All right, Denver Door kicking us off. We're going to go over to football here. Moving forward, if Vanderbilt could sign one marquee transfer through the portal, what position would you want that player to fill? Wide receiver, running back, or edge rusher? I said receiver, Chris, to Will on Monday. I think Cedric Alexander, again, is serviceable. I still think in this day and age, and I think Vanderbilt missed it last year, they've got to get a guy outside that can consistently win one-on-one battles. And I even say consistently, come up with 2 or 3 big catches, 30, 40, 50 yards a game. They just didn't really have a guy like that. I know Skinner did some things at times. Fungi, nobody was consistent enough. And they need a guy that's going to go out and, have 800 receiving yards, at least around that. Like if they want to get to the next level as an offense, get to that next step, I think it's receiver. I don't know about you.
I'm going to be in the minority there. I think it's a great question. I think they're all 3 big needs. Like answering any of those questions in a big way would be a game changer for the roster. I'm still going to go running back. And I know that is like not the fashionable answer in this day and age where running backs are valued less than they've ever been valued. But if anybody was in a room last year game planning against them, I'm not knocking these guys. They do the best they can. Saying, hey, watch out for this guy. He's a home run threat out of the backfield. I mean, they're explosive.
It's hard to say.
Nobody on this team has, like, even when they played Alabama A&M, like, I thought at some point somebody's going to bust off a 60-yard. Well, somebody did. It was Nate Johnson. But see, that's the thing. Nate Johnson had, like, just a few cracks at it running the ball. And he broke a run that their entire backfield couldn't break the entire year. You can say, well, they need a receiver. Okay, they do, but did they make explosive plays in the passing game anyway? Yes, they did. You saw the catch by, and I know it's not a lot of them, right? But but it's more than the basically none that the backfield gave them.
Yeah,
Stowers made huge plays. Sherrill made huge plays at times. Skinner made huge plays at times. And do your receivers get a little more open if you've got a home run threat out of the backfield? Yeah, I bet that goes a little easier. I just look at that and I go, hey, it's not an explosive receiving room, but at least those guys made some plays here and there. That did not happen at running back last year.
No, it didn't. I think we do have to remember too that Pavia is kind of a pseudo running back as well, so that could take away from some of the actual running backs carries. Mo Kane, 31. Rate the transfer class in football out of 10. What is it right now, and then what you expect it to be by summertime? Rate it out of 10.
By the way, I want to. There's a comment about yards per contact and running back. I get it. Their line wasn't good either. I don't think either of them were very good.
No. I mean, the offensive line was not good enough, but you also didn't have a running back that could counteract that. We saw Ray Davis, that was not a great offensive line. Ray Davis played behind. He was still able. He had a great year. So you didn't have either, like you said.
Yeah.
But, yeah, out of 10 with the transfer class, 7.5. I mean, I don't want to give it, I wouldn't slap a 70 on their exam for this class. I don't know that I'd give them as high as an 80 either. I'll go 7.5.
What was the question again?
Rate the transfer class. 1 out of 10.
I mean, I think that's fair. They've loaded up on linemen, which they clearly need. They got a receiver with some potential. They landed a safety. And by the way, if you want to listen to a really good podcast on this, the McCready and Siskey one, I've referenced that a few. They had a really good conversation about the portal yesterday. And you'd have to listen to them unpack it. I don't know that I could replicate their explanation here, but they thought there's not as much talent in the portal as there's been.
No, I've noticed that too.
So I think to me that's a pretty good haul, particularly under those circumstances. I mean, you might even be shorting them a little bit with the 7.5.
Yeah, and somebody told me yesterday too that there's more losses in the portal than wins. There's like you look at your portal haul, you're gonna have if you picked up 14 guys out of the portal. Most likely, 4 of those could be really good players for you and impact players, but 9 or 10 are not or will not. That's just kind of the fact of the matter with the portal. I'd go 7.5. I mean, for their class, but what they expect it to be by summertime, it's another good question. I mean, what they expect, I think ideally, if you ask them, they probably want a receiver and a running back and another edge rusher. That's what I've said. But can they get those guys?
Yeah, I mean, they still need a lot. I mean, and we talked before last season how I just thought it was impossible for them to have this kind of season, given how bad the talent was. The fact that they had this season this year was amazing. But I think what's more amazing too is, or almost maybe not quite as amazing, but still up there. Like here's the thing we're not talking about. I think you alluded to is retention. Like how many schools in the league lost as few guys that could have helped them next year as Vanderbilt has so far? Now it's not over. We'll wait to see what that looks like in the summer. But I mean, guys that could have helped them next year in a big way. I mean, maybe Gunnar Hansen is the only one that they lost. And you could argue that what they've done in the portal is offset that and then some. I don't know. Yeah. But to me, that's what's amazing is they did not lose more guys that could have really helped them on the 2 deep next year than they did.
And Chris, I'll say this too. It seems like it's really organized, their portal strategy. You lose Derick Wright and CJ Taylor. A couple months later, you bring in CJ Hurd. Offensive line is a big talking point. You're losing some guys out of the offensive line. You've got to upgrade in the offensive line. Well, they've brought in 3 guys that I think are all upgrades. They're not world beaters. I don't think they're elite offensive linemen. But even the guy yesterday from Texas Tech, Sterling Porter, he's played a ton of football. He actually transferred in from MTSU. And Isaiah Glass and Jordan White. Like, they've upgraded there. And even, edge rusher, Keanu Coate, a guy that, I mean, that'll help. That'll play for them. So you can't knock what they've done in the portal. Vandy fan 615 seems like wide receiver is the biggest need left. Does the staff feel the urgency to go get one or two in the spring portal? I'd love to ask them. I mean, I would, like I said, I'd put true serum to them. I think they would, but again, we're not in those walls, Chris. They could be satisfied. For all we know, Trent Hudson, they feel really good about, and he's played with Pavia before, and Cheryl can step up and some of the younger guys, but I still think they need a guy. I'm not sure if you've heard anything on the outside about what they're thinking.
No, I think that's the right answer that you gave.
Yeah. And then with Georgia adding multiple top-tier receivers out of the portal, it seems like London Humphreys should leave. Is there a path for him to return, or are the bridges burned? I've said the bridges are burned, Chris. I don't know if you agree there. He's I think he could be a really good player, but he left Vanderbilt at a really hard time. But I think in a weird way, he was the player that left that kicked a lot of this off and made this staff realize a lot. So
yeah, I don't know. I don't know the whole story of what happened. I mean, I'm sure I could have found out if I just asked very bluntly, but it was clear to me that in conversations with people around that it was an awkward parting.
Yeah.
What is? I do have a footnote there. Has Jaden McGowan landed anywhere?
He hasn't, and we got a question about that on Monday, and I've started to think a little bit more about it. I said heck no on Monday. I wouldn't think so. But I mean, you never know.
I happened to be having a conversation with somebody in the building. Oh, this would have been 2 weeks before the bowl game. And I don't remember if I brought it. I don't think I was even the one that brought it up. But somebody said, Jaden McGowan would have been a great fit in this offense. And kind of volunteered that, that didn't end on horrible terms. So I have no idea whether that is, if there's anything to it. It was just a passing comment. If it's upon further review, maybe we'll pass. We're fine with what we have here. But I thought that was interesting because it wasn't really an angle I was going after. Mm-hmm. But when it got brought up, I found that all right, we'll put that on the radar and just see if anything comes of this.
That's interesting. What is your take on the fan base now that there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel for the first time in a long time? Is it possible to have 30,000 Vanderbilt fans in First Bank Stadium or 14,000 Vanderbilt fans in Memorial again? I tend to think it's possible, at least for bigger games. Chris? I know we've talked about this ad nauseam.
That is the biggest question. One of the biggest questions I have right now. When push comes to shove, how big is the fan base?
And I'm still wondering for Tennessee and Kentucky, what does Memorial look like? And even for football, because we talked a lot about, the excuse this year for football was, that we didn't know this type of season was coming. So, the road teams bought season tickets. Well, that excuse is going away this year for football, and that'll be really interesting.
Well, here's the thing that is these excuses pile up. It feels like every time they miss the mark on attendance, and they've sort of trained the fan base into making excuses for them. Well, it was this. It was an 8:00 game. It was, other fan bases. Well, first of all, why did other fan bases get more excited about buying tickets for their games than they did? You can't break the window and then credit yourself for installing a new one that works. That's number one. Number two, I don't remember. Maybe this is the world that existed before. But when they were having much bigger turnouts for football and basketball, I don't remember all the games being 75 degrees with no humidity. And played at just the right time where no other ball games were on TV that anybody would want to watch. I don't remember Now I will tell you this: the tip-off change. It used to be like games were 7 o'clock, like clockwork on weekdays, and they were on Wednesdays, and you were used to it. Okay, and you knew that when it was 7 o'clock, basically every other Wednesday, you had a home game memorial. I think changing the tip-off structure for TV to 6 and 8 hasn't helped because 6 is early to get there, and 8 is if you got kids, it might be a little late. Like I got home last night, and this is different because we had media responses. I walked in about midnight from Memorial.
Yeah.
After we did our post-game, did our writing, all that stuff. So I get that it's late, but everybody else has figured it out. I mean, for crying out loud, Auburn's having, selling out the arena, and you can't get a seat in the place. Georgia that building looked pretty lit last night when we watched that from our computers sitting in the like. Why am I unaware that like the laws of fan attendance only apply to them and nobody else? I mean, I've even heard an excuse made for, well, the growth of Nashville is working against us. Really? I mean, go do the math and you figure that one out for me because I can't. I just continue to hear a lot of excuses and I don't see effort. And when you dig yourself a hole and you're 50 feet before ground, the effort that you go into pouring, 10 feet of dirt in the hole, it's a lot. But you need to multiply that by 5 just to get yourself to where you can get out of the hole. And I'm not even talking about gaining. Like, we don't even talk about growing the fan base anymore. It's just about how do you get it back to where the fan base is
to a respectable baseline level.
Yeah, like whatever the 15th size fan bases in this league is, how do you get it back to where it's a third of that? Get it back. I think this is why I get so irritated with the school.
Yeah.
Like it has been able to shape the narrative. And somebody asked me this yesterday. I think this kind of applies to, like, why do the Titans and the Predators and why are they so bad right now? And why is now look, radio yesterday was not fun if you were the Titans, if you're listening to that. But no. I think this is an easier media town than most places. And I realize I'm getting on a tangent, but like they've lost for so long that there's no, I mean, I've been to Memorial 3 times in the last year. Really year and 2 months, where it was like I was the only guy there covering basketball. Other than like if you were with me or Brandon was with me, like we were the only outlet there. I think that they've sort of benefited from that too, that there's nobody on the outside looking in and asking questions and saying, why can't this be better? But hey, the bottom line to all this is they've got to, if they put in the effort into building the fan base like they do fighting back against criticisms, you'd see some change there.
I like it. All right. Braves Doors 13. Based off of the results of the game last night, where do you rank them in the SEC right now? I don't know that it changes a lot for me. I mean, I told Joe yesterday 10 through 12 in SEC power rankings. Maybe 12th now, if you had him at 11 last night. But Chris, I know you're right into the power rankings. Like, what did after last night? Is there much of a bump back?
I would have a hard case ranking them below LSU or South Carolina. I would have a hard case ranking them ahead of everybody else. Texas and Arkansas are 2 to me that are debatable. Texas darn near beat Auburn last night, which nobody's doing basically anywhere, anytime. Texas got a lot of talent. I would put them 14 this morning. I think Georgia was also debatable. Georgia beat Kentucky last night, if you didn't see it. And a lot of the computers have got Vanderbilt higher than Missouri. Ken Palm flipped that this morning. I think Missouri has got a more talented roster. I mean, we're gonna find that one out on Saturday.
Yeah.
If they go win in Columbia, then that's one more. But right now, 14 feels like the answer to me.
All right, let's rumble through these some of these comments, questions here on YouTube, and then we'll get this wrapped up. Chris will probably typically do this, but again, if you guys have any last-minute ones you want to throw in there, feel free to do that. Dylan says, my only complaint with Byington so far is him continuing to play Magnon. He gives them zero offense in subpar defense. Well, I think that's the thing. That's his role, Chris. He is a good defender. Now, I do think he himself too got a little bullied last night at times in the paint and on some drives to the rim. He really doesn't give him a ton of offense. He was, the thing about Magnon, if he was a shooter, this could be a different team because I feel like he's caught wide open a lot on the outside, and he'll drive instead. But he's athletic. I think he's kind of a prototype Byington player where he'll get steals, he'll get out and run. He plays well in transition, but yeah, he doesn't give him a ton of offense. Chris, I think you saw where that's hurting them a little bit.
I liked the ad. I thought that he was a guy that when he was on the floor, and he's an old guy too, he's played a lot of ball, that gave, where was he last year?
Cornell,
and he was Ivy League. I thought he gave Cornell. Now he fouled a lot, which you're seeing that translate here. Like he's the kind of guy that you need on an 8 or 9 man rotation right now if you're Vanderbilt. Like if you're Florida or some teams like that, or Tennessee, he's probably not seeing the floor. I think he gives him value. When he's having to step up and play a bigger role than he needs to be, that's not really on him. That's on the situation.
Right. Okay, Willie, Vandy is the only team in the SEC that doesn't have a 25-plus minute per night player. They were gassed last night, and it showed when they played extended minutes, 14 games in and not in game shape. That's another good point there. Carey, and I asked that to Byington last night, and he basically said, yeah, Carey was gassed. That's why I took him out at the 4-minute mark. Clay, I posted this on the board, but Tyler Tanner should be our main facilitator on offense. He's incredible at moving the ball. AJ does a lot, but the ball sticks in his hands sometimes. Chris, I think they learned a lot about Tanner last night. I thought he grew up, and I think last night, I think it could be a blessing in disguise that Edwards really wasn't much of a factor last night, because I thought Tanner played really well. I thought he grew up, and I think down the road, down the stretch of this season, if they make the tournament, if they make a run and make the tournament, I think Tanner's a big part of it. He was a big part of that comeback, Chris.
It's funny because last night, the first half, I'm thinking maybe Tyler Tanner is run up against his level, because I don't think he scored in the first half. Second half, like I said, if you're having to figure out what are you going to do here to get Edwards in for scoring, it's going to involve bringing him off the floor. I mean, that to me points to a guy that handled the situation pretty well. I'm not sure that he's a primary point guard type. I think he's a combo guard. I need to see more, but man, I really, really like him. Still hasn't turned the ball over, by the way.
No, which is unbelievable. Danny says, think if we let Edwards rest that game, we actually have a chance. Byington might agree with you as well. He kind of he sounded regretful last night, which was an interesting admission. So that is interesting. Danny, right back here with Big Pete, who's been rumored on the board to have some interest in Vandy. Recently visited. Robbie had a really good update. Go check it out. Go subscribe. That's what I'll say. That's what I'll say about Shiaz Pete from New Mexico State. Robbie's all over that stuff. Yeah. So go subscribe. I mean, any questions you've got, Robbie will give them to you in terms of those portal gets. And I think I'm going to have Robbie on tomorrow. So
yeah, guys like him have got it made. There are more suitors for somebody like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think he's a guy. One thing I will say, he's enjoying the portal recruitment.
I mean, if he's got a Scott Boras type agent, I'm holding out until
I do wonder.
Minute.
Yeah, I do wonder how many guys just take like a 2-month-long vacation, basically, because they can and visit, line up 7-8 visits and.
Well, I mean, let's try this on for size, okay? Let's say that somewhere at a Power 5 program that doesn't need a tackle right now, one of your tackles goes out and rips up an ACL in a pickup basketball game. You could have somebody and they're like, oh crap, we better get something. Like if you're Pete, why do you, and it's just a game of money, why do you make a commitment at this point? Now, look, the other thing could happen, if he wants to be at Vanderbilt and they say, we're tired of this, we need a bird in the hand, it could bite you the other way too. But I mean, it
Yeah.
is a boy. If you are a portal guy right now, if you listen to what's out there and the money, I mean, I've heard it said that $700,000 is what's getting thrown at linemen for just guys who've made a start somewhere at a Power 5 type level. That's a lot of money. I mean, just for guys that I think you would say are maybe serviceable.
Yeah. Justin, how did you feel about Byington's press conference attitude compared to how Stack was after a loss? Normal? I mean, there wasn't a ton of normal with Stack after some losses. It's kind of what I expected from Byington. You can tell he's frustrated, and I think you can tell that he knows and he's probably known him for a while, but he knows the limitations of this team. And, he admits a lot, and he takes blame a lot more than Stackhouse. He said, it's on me to go fix this in practice. There's a lot of it's on me. And I don't know that we ever heard that from Stack.
Yeah, that's not exactly a high bar you set there. I mean, I love dealing with him. I think he answers your questions really well. He gave the vibe from the minute he sat down of like, I'm irritated with how this came out. And like, I think that you tell he gets a little, he's great about answering questions, but you can tell he gets a little bit antsy. I think going through his head, and he was great to us, by the way, was probably a little bit, I wish these guys would quit asking me questions so I can go in the film room and get to work on fixing this. I think that's the vibe I get out of him, which was not at all the vibe that we got from the last one.
No, he's all business. Well, that's what we got, Chris. Appreciate you hopping on. I think we're going to try to do this every Wednesday. And Luke is under the weather. So, say a prayer for him. Hopefully he gets better. And we'll be able to get him back in the saddle next week. I know a lot of people are looking forward to him. I know he always talks with Clark at the end of the season, so that'll be interesting to talk with Luke. But Chris got a game Saturday, and we'll see what this basketball team keeps doing. And I appreciate you hopping in.
Yeah, it was fun to do it. We'll see how these go going forward. Maybe I can jump on another one here and there during the week. Thank you for doing this, Billy. I think it really adds to our product. And again, if you're catching this late, go to Vandy 24/7 right now. I think on the front page there's a deal for you. Get it for $26 for a year. That really helps us. And you will love the content. Like it is. There's nothing in the market like it. So do that if you haven't.
Yeah, his podcast's always been free. We plan for it to stay that way. Give the podcast a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. Like Chris said, go subscribe to Vandy247.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel right here. Hit that like button, subscribe. And also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. For Chris Lee, I'm Billy Derick. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy Sports Podcast.